Hello there, my friend. Would you sit with me for a little while? I've made some tea. Nothing fancy, just something warm to wrap your hands around. There's a quiet chair here beside mine. I saved it for you. Before we begin, take a moment, breathe, let the noise of the day fall away. This space we're in now, it's just us, no rush. No need to be anything other than yourself. I want to ask you something small and yet not so small. Have you ever wondered, truly wondered, if someone still needs you? Not in the way they once did perhaps, not with urgent requests or loud demands, but in a deeper way, in the way that simply says, your presence still means something. There was a time in my life, not so long ago, when I quietly asked myself that very question. I didn't say it aloud, of course. Most of us don't, but I carried it inside like a folded note. Am I still needed? Or have I quietly faded into the background of the lives I love most? Maybe you've asked that too. And if you have, well, you've come to the right place. Not for answers necessarily, but for a story, a real one. Mine. Because I've walked that quiet path of wondering. I've sat at the edge of family dinners, felt the hush of a house that no longer turns to me first, and asked myself, if I weren't here, would anyone notice the silence? But what I've learned, slowly and gently, is that love doesn't always look or sound the way we expect it to. And being needed, it doesn't always come wrapped in words. So come, sit with me. Let me tell you a story, not just of doubt, but of discovery. Not of sorrow, but of something softer, more enduring. Let me share with you what happened when I learned to look closer. Because maybe, just maybe, there's someone who needs you, even if they've never said so out loud. It was a quiet Saturday afternoon, the kind where the world seems to move around you but not quite with you. The hum of the washing machine somewhere in the background, the faint sounds of children laughing outside, and yet inside the house, it was still. I sat alone in my room. Not sad exactly, but with a kind of silence that felt deep, like the house had skipped over me in its rhythm. There were no knocks at the door, no voices asking, "Dad, do you want to come with us?" Or, "Grandpa, can I help you with something?" They were all busy, of course. My daughter-in-law in the kitchen prepping for a Sunday lunch, my son fixing something in the garage, and the grandkids glued to their screens or their toys. Life was happening, but somehow it felt like it was happening a few feet away from me. I wasn't in the center of it anymore. I wasn't even on the edge. I was just somewhere else. A small voice in my head whispered, as it had many times before, "No one needs me anymore." It wasn't bitter. It wasn't angry, just matter of fact, like stating the weather. It's cloudy today. No one needs me, just like that. And as I sat there staring at the tiny crack in the wooden floor, I wondered something quietly but profoundly. If I weren't here tomorrow, would anything really change? Not in a dramatic way. I wasn't thinking of leaving, not really. But there was a pull, an ache that comes when you feel slowly erased, not by anyone's cruelty, but by time and busyness. And it makes you wonder, have I become invisible? Have you ever felt that? That gentle ache of being unnoticed, not unloved, but unneeded. It's a subtle difference, but one that stings in its own way. I used to be the one everyone came to when the pipe broke, when someone needed a ride, when a voice of reason was required in the chaos. And now, I wasn't sure anymore. Maybe that's why I kept repeating the phrase in my head, not to convince myself, but to understand it, to sit with it, to see where it would take me. And eventually it led me here, to this quiet afternoon, to this room, to this cup of lukewarm tea, to you. And I ask you, just as I asked myself then, have you ever felt like no one needs you? Because if you have, you're not alone. I thought I was, but I wasn't. When I was younger, I believed love came wrapped in words. Clear, unambiguous, almost theatrical. You told someone you missed them. You told them you cared. You reached out with hugs, phone calls, surprises. That was the shape of love I knew, and the shape I looked for. So as my children grew, I carried that same shape with me, expecting love to be loud and recognizable. I remember when my son left for college and called me almost every day for a while. That felt like love. That was love. And when the calls came less often, when texts replaced voices, when even the texts slowed to a trickle, I began to wonder, did he stop needing me? Did he stop loving me? I didn't ask, but the silence echoed. Then came the years where my children became parents. Their own homes, their own rhythms, their own worries. I saw them less, and when we did talk, the conversations were practical. Can you come over at noon? Do you want rice or noodles for dinner? No big declarations, no, I miss you, Dad. No, I've been thinking about you. And slowly, a little voice in me started to speak. They don't need you anymore. And I believed it for a time. Until one quiet morning, I remembered something strange. I remembered myself at their age. I remembered how little I said to my own parents, how my love for them was buried under the weight of responsibility, fatigue, distraction. And yet I loved them so deeply it sometimes hurt. I remembered how I'd get up early to clear the walkway before my father could shovel snow. I'd fix the broken hinge before my mother could ask. I'd leave a note when I had to go out just so she wouldn't worry. I didn't say I love you every day, but I lived it, quietly, and I wondered, could it be the same now, just reversed? Could it be that my children love me, need me, think of me, just in ways I no longer recognized because I was waiting for the words? It's a strange thing, isn't it? How we think we need to hear love to feel it, even when we've lived our lives expressing it in silence. So I started to look again, not for the words, but for the gestures. The cups of tea brought to my table, the car warmed up before a doctor's appointment, the way they always reminded the grandkids, be gentle with Grandpa. I began to ask myself, is it really true that no one needs me? Or had I simply forgotten the many ways love can whisper? They were always there, those small gestures. I just didn't know how to read them. Back when I was still expecting love to come with fanfare and speeches, I missed so much that was quietly offered. Not because I was blind, but because I was looking in the wrong direction. Take my son, for example. He's a quiet man, not one for long conversations or warm embraces. I used to wonder if I'd raised him too sternly, if maybe I'd built a distance I couldn't close. But then I started noticing patterns, tiny things. Every time he left the house, he'd check the electric kettle in my room. Just a glance, a small hand on the switch. I never asked him to. He never said anything about it. But I began to realize it was because of that one time years ago when I forgot to turn it off and the water boiled dry. He hadn't said much then, just cleaned it and brought me a new one. But ever since he checked, quietly, consistently, that was love. My daughter-in-law too. She's kind, practical, always moving. I used to think she was simply polite, respectful, but I noticed she never adds MSG to the dishes she serves me. Not once. I didn't even remember mentioning my sensitivity to it more than once in passing. Yet there it was, every meal, a quiet accommodation. And the children, the little ones. They rarely say much beyond their cartoon songs and snack requests. But my youngest granddaughter, she always climbs onto the arm of my chair during evening TV time. She doesn't say a word, doesn't ask questions, just sits, leans against me. That's all. But isn't that something? It's a seat of trust, of presence. A tiny child saying without words, "I want to be near you." It humbled me to realize how long I'd missed these things. Not because they weren't happening, but because I was expecting something else. I was waiting for loud declarations, not realizing that some people only know how to love quietly. Have you ever done that? Waited so long for someone to say something, not realizing they'd already shown it in 100 unspoken ways? I think it's common, especially as we get older. We're taught to speak our minds, to seek clarity, to want confirmation, and when we don't get it in the form we expect, we assume it doesn't exist. But love, I've come to see, is a shapeshifter. It adapts to each person. It hides in routines, in habits, in quiet presence. There's something deeply beautiful in that. Something that asks us to slow down, to pay attention, to believe that we are still part of something, even if it whispers instead of shouts. I started keeping a kind of mental journal after that. Not with pen and paper, but in the way I observed. Each act of quiet care became a page in that journal. Each was a reminder. I am seen. I am included. I am still needed. Maybe not in the ways I once was, with tools in my hand or advice on my tongue, but in this new season, I am needed in subtler ways, in the soft background of family life, like a lighthouse whose light doesn't call attention to itself, but keeps shining nonetheless. If no one has told you lately, look again. Someone might be needing you, loving you, appreciating you, in silence. You only need to listen differently. It wasn't a dramatic moment. No violins in the background, no sudden epiphanies bathed in golden light. Just an ordinary evening, the kind I'd lived through hundreds of times. I had a cold, nothing serious. A little cough, some body aches, and that strange heaviness that comes with even the mildest illness. I hadn't told anyone. I didn't want to make a fuss. I figured I'd just stay in bed, drink water, sleep it off. So I stayed in my room all day. The house hummed along as usual, doors opening and closing, voices down the hallway, the occasional bark from the neighbor's dog. I heard it all from my bed and felt apart. When dinner came, no one knocked on my door, and I thought quietly, they must have forgotten, or maybe they assume I already ate. A familiar ache rose up in me, the one that whispered, "You don't matter much anymore." I dozed off for a while, not wanting to feel it, and when I woke, it was already dark outside. The hallway light spilled gently through the crack beneath my door. Then I heard it, a soft creak. The door opened, just slightly. I didn't even turn over. I thought maybe someone had mistaken the room. But then I felt it. A small, warm presence entered the room. A hand placed something on the nightstand beside me. I opened my eyes, just a sliver. There, barely visible in the dim light, was a bowl of steaming rice porridge. Next to it, a folded napkin. And beneath that, what caught my heart, a handwritten note on a torn piece of paper. Noi, eat this and remember to take your medicine. No name, no flourish, just that. I didn't need to know who had written it. I didn't need to ask. It was enough. In that moment, something shifted. A realization unfolded. Not loud, not sudden, but steady and warm. I was seen. I was remembered. I was still part of the story. They hadn't said it. They didn't need to. That simple gesture, that quiet offering, it spoke volumes. And I'll be honest with you, I cried a little, not from sadness, but from that kind of tenderness that sneaks up on you when you're reminded ever so gently that you still belong. Isn't it strange how the smallest things can open the biggest doors inside us? A bowl of porridge, a note with no name, a knock that never came, but a heart that surely did. That night I ate slowly, gratefully. I looked at that little note over and over, as if it were a priceless treasure, because in a way it was. Sometimes love doesn't need a stage. Sometimes it just needs a quiet room and someone who remembers. And in case no one has brought you porridge lately, let me be the one to say, you are not forgotten. You matter, even if the words haven't found you yet. The morning after the porridge, something subtle inside me had changed. Not like the flipping of a switch, but more like the shift of light at dawn. Barely noticeable at first, but then undeniable. I found myself moving through the house with a new softness, not just physically, but emotionally. I started noticing not just what was said, but what wasn't. The pauses between words, the glances, the small hesitations, the way someone lingered a little longer than usual before leaving the room. It was like learning a new language, the language of quiet affection. My son doesn't say much, as I've told you, but that morning, as I sat in the kitchen with my tea, he passed by and casually asked, "How's your back today, Dad?" Just that. No grand concern, no dramatic worry, but he'd noticed, he remembered, and something in his voice, something almost hidden, told me it mattered to him. I smiled, and instead of brushing it off like I might have before, I said, "A little stiff, but better today." He nodded, said nothing more, but the silence was warm, comfortable. I began to realize that love isn't always about what's done for you. It's about being noticed, being remembered in someone's small mental space. It's about inclusion in their day, even if it's quiet. And in return, I changed how I gave my love. I stopped trying to be the one who had the answers. I didn't need to remind them I used to do this or that, or tell the children how things used to be better. Instead, I listened. When my daughter-in-law looked tired, I didn't jump in with advice. I simply made her a cup of tea, placed it on the table, and returned to my seat. She looked at me surprised, then smiled. No words were exchanged, none needed. With the grandkids, I learned not to scold when they were restless, but to ask gently, "Do you want to sit with Grandpa for a while?" And when they did, I'd let the silence fill the space. Not every act of love needs sound. I began to feel more peaceful, less like I had something to prove, more like I was part of a quiet current that runs beneath the noise of daily life. Have you ever tried that? Sitting still, not to be heard, but just to be, and in that stillness, offering presence instead of performance? It's freeing. And the most surprising part? I felt more connected than ever. Not through obligation or usefulness, but through simple being. That's the thing about growing older. You don't always lose your place. Sometimes you're just invited to take a different seat at the table, A quieter one perhaps, but no less valuable. And from that seat, you begin to notice how much beauty lives in the background. The clink of dishes that someone else is washing, the child who leans their head on your shoulder without asking, the glance your son gives you before heading out the door, all of it, love in different forms, and all of it more than enough. For a long time, I thought loving someone meant doing things for them, fixing problems, giving advice, stepping in before they stumbled. That's the kind of love I was raised with. The kind where you prove your care by action, by effort, by presence that's loud and steady. But over time, I realized that not everyone needs love in the form I knew how to give. One evening, my grandson sat at the table, head bent over his homework. He looked frustrated, pencil tapping the page. My instinct was to walk over, offer help, maybe even solve the problem for him. But something held me back. I remembered how I used to feel years ago when someone hovered over me, how I just wanted space to figure it out. So instead of stepping in, I sat nearby. I didn't say a word, just sipped my tea and waited. After a few minutes, he looked up and quietly asked, "Grandpa, do you know how to do long division?" I smiled. "I've been known to solve 1 or 2 problems in my day." He slid the notebook over. That moment stayed with me, not because I helped him with math, but because I helped him when he asked. I loved him in the way he needed, not in the way I was used to giving. With my daughter-in-law, it was different. She's independent, efficient, and rarely asks for help. At first, I used to offer anyway, suggest ways to manage the kitchen, remind her how I used to do things when the kids were little. She always smiled politely, but there was a tension I didn't quite understand. Then one day, I simply watched her. She moved through the kitchen with a rhythm all her own. She knew what each child liked, where the snacks were hidden, how to fold the napkins just so. She didn't need advice, she needed space to be trusted. So I stopped offering suggestions. I started doing the smaller things. Setting the table quietly, wiping down the counters without being asked. She noticed. One day as we both stood side by side at the sink, she said, "It's nice having you here." Not because I fixed anything, not because I took over, but because I simply stood beside her. Isn't that a kind of love too? Loving in a way that lets the other person feel free, not managed. With my son, it was even more subtle. We rarely talk about feelings, but I learned to meet him where he was, to nod instead of insist, to sit in silence on the porch with him, both of us watching the evening roll in. Sometimes just being there is enough. We don't always get to choose how our love is received, but we do get to choose how gently we offer it. So I began loving differently, less like a fixer, more like a companion. I stopped trying to be useful all the time. And oddly, in doing less, I felt more present, more valued. Have you ever tried that? Just being with someone, without needing to change or guide or correct. It's a quiet kind of intimacy, and it teaches you more about love than words ever could. Sometimes the best way to love is to listen. Sometimes it's to let go. Sometimes it's just to sit beside someone in the stillness and let that be enough. There was a time when I needed to hear the words, "Dad, I need you." "Grandpa, I love you." I craved them, not because I doubted the feelings behind them, but because I was used to measuring love in decibels, in syllables, in phrases written on cards or spoken on birthdays. But now I've come to understand something gentler, something quieter, and perhaps even more enduring. Love doesn't always speak, but it stays. It stays in the way the house shifts its rhythm when I wake up, in how someone always remembers to leave the hallway light on at night, in how there's always a clean towel on the chair by my bathroom door, even when I forget to ask. It stays in the glance my son gives me before he heads out, the one that says, "You good?" without the words. In the soft blanket my daughter-in-law drapes over the armrest when the evenings get chilly. In the grandchild who, without invitation, places her toy gently into my lap, just so I'll hold it while she plays. These are not declarations, these are presents. And presence, I've learned, is a language of love all its own. There was a time when I thought I had become invisible, but now I see I was never unseen. I was simply surrounded by a love that doesn't always raise its voice. Have you ever felt that? That someone loved you not in loud proclamations, but in the ways they stayed near, in the things they remembered, in the patience they gave? We live in a world that prizes expression, loud, public, documented. But in the quiet corners of our lives, in the subtle rhythms of our homes, there's another kind of connection. One that doesn't need proof, just trust. And as I sit here now looking back, not with regret, but with tenderness, I feel deeply grateful. Grateful for the lessons whispered in silence. Grateful for the touch of a hand that didn't need to explain itself. Grateful for the laughter that happened just out of view, but never beyond reach. Grateful to still be needed, not in the way I once was, but in the way that matters now. If you've ever wondered whether anyone still needs you, if you've ever felt like your part in the story is over, let me say this. Maybe someone's love for you has changed shape. Maybe it no longer arrives in words or requests or urgent needs. But maybe it's there, in the way they make your tea just how you like it, in the way they call from the other room just to say, "We're leaving now," in the way they smile when they see you, even for a second. Maybe someone does need you so deeply, so quietly, that they forgot how to say it. But you'll know, if you're willing to look, not for the noise, but for the stillness. That's where love lives. Still, steady, soft as a whisper, and always, always present. So here we are, you and I, at the end of this gentle little journey. If you've stayed with me this far, thank you. It means something, truly, to have someone to sit with through these quiet reflections. Perhaps you recognize pieces of yourself in my story, or perhaps you recognize someone you love. Either way, I hope it made you feel less alone. You see, aging has a way of whispering doubts into our hearts. It tells us we are less needed, less seen, less important than we once were. But that voice, it's not the whole truth. The truth is softer and stronger. You are still part of someone's world. Still a light that someone quietly steers by. Still a source of comfort, even if no one says it aloud. I spent a long time thinking that love had to be obvious to be real, that I had to be useful to be wanted, that I had to hear the words to believe the feeling. But what I've come to understand is this. Love grows quieter with time, but not weaker. It doesn't always arrive in full sentences. Sometimes it's just a glance, a gesture, a bowl of porridge left by a bedside. Sometimes it's the silence between two people that says, "I'm here. I see you." If today you're wondering whether you matter, let me offer this. You do. You matter more than you know. And if no one has said it lately, if no one has looked you in the eye and reminded you, I'll say it now. You are needed. You are remembered. You are still quietly, beautifully loved. Maybe not in the way you once were, Maybe not in ways that fill rooms with applause or inboxes with messages, but in the way that counts, the kind that stays. As we bring this little tea time conversation to a close, I leave you with a gentle question. Is there someone in your life who's loving you quietly? And perhaps, just perhaps, is there someone who needs your quiet love too? The world doesn't always need us to shout. Sometimes it just needs us to stay. So stay, be present, and let love, soft, unspoken, and steady, find its way in. Until next time, my friend, may your days be wrapped in quiet kindness, and may you never doubt that someone, somewhere, is glad that you are here.